Hey, Awesomes, Instructor Corey here with how to write a results section for an APA paper, or how to write an APA results section. Either way. All right, so here's what I'll say about the results section. In some cases, and in some ways, this can be one of the more challenging sections to write because when you're revealing or delivering, writing the results, um, it's very easy to drift into discussion because it's very challenging oftentimes to say, okay, here are the results. Here are the percentages of individuals that responded thusly, right? And not want to then say demonstrating that, right? This shows that, right? So I encourage you, look at the examples that I have posted here. But um, I think if we just are aware of it, I think that's oftentimes the biggest challenge to kind of overcome is to make sure that you're not drifting from results into discussing or starting to analyze those results yet. Save those for the discussion, right? We're just going to talk about what the results are, okay? And so one way to think about this, think of the results section summarizes and presents what you found, all right? Whereas conversely, right, you're going to wait to tell your audience in the discussion section what the findings then mean. Okay. And so as you're writing that and you're saying, okay, so the survey came back and you find that 62% of respondents said this, 42% of respondents said that, or whatever. You are just presenting that information as that's what you found, right? And not try to then start analyzing it, right? It's going to be, in some ways, when you deliver these results, you'll say maybe that it reveals something very specifically, but do not discuss it just yet, okay? And that's the tough part. And so I give you some examples here. And as you'll even notice in mine, right, that I'm not making necessarily, I'm not going into too much discussion, right? I'm saying, okay, here's what the respondents identified. It was overwhelming. And here was, to give some context about that particular question. That is the theme that emerged, right, from the voices, and the attendance was clear, right? Based on that was just a result, right? I didn't go into to talk about what it was about the message yet, okay? They identified things that were extremely important, right? It was 76% of them said that, right? And then if I needed to, in this particular case, the message was identified very, very specifically. And so I clarified that, if you need to clarify a term, perhaps, is because then it kind of, those results then lead to the discussion. So when I go into the discussion phase next, when I'm talking about the message, it was important to kind of do a little bit of housekeeping, if you will. And so, then I kind of explicate and tease out a little bit of things when they revealed that it was this. It was extremely influential. It was obviously one of the question prompt choices, using a Likert scale. So I put that in as well. And then things that were relevant, right, when it comes to interview questions that tied into those type of things were kind of all put together in that one paragraph because they were all kind of talking about the same thing, right, as it applied to these particular results, right? It was very similar to, they revealed that, right? So revealed results, anything that you feel that is revealing or that's demonstrating or showing in when it comes to results and results only, right? And kind of think about this is what you've discovered. You have found something very, very particular, interesting about these, but try not to go into too much detail, right? Just kind of, this is the surface aspect of it. The secondary results, you don't need to go through each individual source per se. And this is not quite, it's literature review-ish, but it's not a literature review because you're not talking about everything. You're just going to really talk about and bring in the results of those particular sources, from those particular sources that you're going to discuss because they are extremely germane to your topic. there's something that you're going to use perhaps when you're in your discussion that's going to help you set up for either a recommendation or for to support your overall argument or claim, or even if this is an analysis type argument, right, to support your analysis and why we should do something differently or look at something differently based on that. So you want to really find just the results very, very specifically that have to do with that. So here is also an excerpt from secondary research results again, from my dissertation, since that's the thing I have the most access to to kind of show. So, it comes to church growth because that's what we're talking about. This particular topic, and as you read from my other examples and samples that I brought in from there, I should begin to become a little clear and evident that that's what I'm talking about. And so he writes that these are impossible to ignore, and then he's giving his reasons, and then I surmise some of these things in a way that put together is, okay, I've got this author talking about this one thing, and so I've got these other authors also talking about it. So I'm going to paraphrase in some way and bring in all the relevant results of those, because I'm going to use those things, right? So it's a little bit summary, it's a little bit paraphrase. And so what I decided to do, what the results really showed me, is that there's two camps about church growth. And so I put, here's what the one side is saying. These are the results. This is what they are saying. I'm not analyzing them quite yet. I'm just saying on this one side, church growth is increasing. And on the other side, church growth is increasing the membership of church through these other ways. All right. So I have several kind of different layers. This took me actually longer than I thought it would. Because the results of all these different scholars saying all these different things, right? And that's when, I had done an annotated bibliography. Prior to that, I had mapped out my sources as well. I had put this map together where I had my sources, and then I started to group them. And this is a really good, it was really good practice to kind of help me write this. So I've got church growth that is saying it is particularly because of these things. On the other side, it's saying it's about this other thing, right? And then there's also a division even within that to talk about whether or not it's even positive or not. So I had to talk about these results and kind of put them into these particular different aspects of camps, if you will, to help set that up. And of course, if you go back up and think about how you put your literature review together, a lot of times it helps you when you put your literature review together. Let's say you did it thematically / theoretically. Those type of things, or if you did it by time, if you had something that was demonstrating over time, then perhaps, the results would show early results, and as how maybe perhaps the results maybe over time have changed. So use that information that you had earlier, because at the end, your APA research paper, although where you write them in, there's these sections, you still want to have some type of flow to them as well. So I show this division between these two, and as you'll notice, there's a lot of this, right? Almost, I don't say after almost every single sentence, but in quite a few ways, almost each sentence has an in-text citation, crediting that, because it's that result, right? I am literally just kind of handing out results, but not in a randomized kind of way to say, okay, this, just tossing them out there. It's still put together where it's presented logically, right? It's also presented in a way that when I then discuss it, this makes sense to help set up my discussion, so that my discussion really makes a lot of sense, right? Because that's where I'm going to really make my claims, right? That's what's going to lead me into my grandiose conclusion, or in depending on your particular topic, support your overall claim, support any type of suggestions or recommendations that you may be making. You want all these things are kind of working together as you go through the paper to help you arrive at the big crescendo at the end. So the big thing here is to always make sure, even after you write something, just make sure, okay, everything I'm talking about is just strictly results oriented. This is what I discovered. This is what I found, right? This is what I have found. Maybe, even to a certain point, which I did a little bit in my primary research results, these results seem to show, right? It's setting you up for a good discussion, but then don't discuss what was shown, okay? Or what you found. Just give it, this is what we found, okay? Like I said, this is probably the most challenging section to write, so be patient with yourself. Sometimes this section can take, I don't want to say the longest, but in my case, especially with the secondary research, was coming up with a way to present, this particular paragraph, so that I could, okay, we're talking about church growth, and here are the results of church growth, right? And so by mapping out my sources and thinking, okay, I've got sources that are talking about it like this way over here, this one over here, and I had a couple that were like right here. All right, so I was like, how can I put that into paragraphical form, make it make sense, and just present the results. And another thing, of course, you can do, if you want to get creative, please feel free to. I've had students do a lot of this quite frequently, and it does seem to help when you can visualize those results, maybe through a graph of some kind, or using a graphic, maybe a chart, or, something similar to that, pie charts, whether it be, step charts, label charts, et cetera, whatever you think will help, charts and graphs to help visualize the results. Oftentimes, a good creative graphic that's not too busy, but also really helps crystallize what your results are always beneficial. All right, guys, that does it for me. I hope you found this helpful. Hopefully